two, three.
Hello, listeners. This is Shailaja Iyer, and you are listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the season 3 of the CHRO Mindset podcast. Following an amazing first 2 seasons, we are returning with even more engaging discussions and practical takeaways. Today, we have our guest Shailaja Iyer, who has joined us on the podcast. Shailaja is a seasoned HR leader, CHRO, board member, and a leadership coach with nearly 28 years of experience. Known for combining strategic business acumen with a deep people first mindset, she has led organizations through growth, transformation, and integration phases. Her work includes setting up business units and COEs, leading post acquisition integration, and embedding digital HR and talent analytics across global and India based teams. With cross industry expertise in tech services, AI, product engineering, and consumer durables, Shailaja excels in org design, workforce planning, and building leadership pipelines. She has driven future ready HR through learning universities, succession planning, and cultural change. A respected voice in HR circles, she has contributed to People Matters, ETHR, CII, and co led NASSCOM's leadership series to shape next gen business leaders. Shailaja, we are thrilled to have you today. Welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast powered by HROne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let me first start off and give our audience a gist of what we are going to cover today, right? So as the title goes by Founder Lessons, CXO Leaders, the dual mandate for CHROs today. So if you look at the current scenario, the HR role is no longer what it used to be, especially at the top. Today's HR leaders are expected to think like founders while grooming the next line of CXOs. But what does that really mean in practice? In today's episode, we'll explore the dual mindset modern HR professionals must master, building fast like a founder and leading deep like a CXO. You'll hear how top HR leaders are embracing agility, risk, and storytelling, not just to drive HR agendas, but to shape entire businesses. We'll also dive into what it takes to scale talent, culture, and leadership pipelines simultaneously, and why the future belongs to HR professionals who can toggle between steward and builder modes with ease. If you are in HR and you are aspiring to influence, innovate, and groom tomorrow's leaders, this episode is for you. So let's start off with an icebreaker question first, Shailaja. What's the most non-HR experience that made you a better CHRO?
So, 3 years back, I had the good fortune of being offered the role of India country head. The first time when kind of the leadership spoke to me about it, and I was like, really, like, me, are you sure? Kind of, I literally had come from a functional leader mindset, and taking on a business leadership role was something, you know kind of, I had to just go back and rethink what value I would deliver. And I think that particular role or change completely opened me both in terms of exposure to business, client experiences, just in terms of the scope and the depth and the diversity of what I had to do. I think it made me a better professional as well as a better CHRO.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. Now let's get into the soul of what today's episode is all about, right? So, uh, uh, first question for you: what does the dual mandate really mean in today's CHRO role? I think it is important we sort of define that out so that it becomes easy for folks to understand. What duality are we referring to here?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question, Pulkit. And duality. At a very fundamental, basic level, it's there in all walks of life.
Yeah.
So all of us don't play any one single role. So you're a parent, you're a professional, even in the house. You kind of, you're the loving father as well as you're also the disciplinarian. So I think duality just defines us as people. And therefore when they come to work, why is it that most people expect that I will play only one role and play it really well? And I think that's the mindset that we need to move away from, and completely, kind of discard.
Mm.
So that's number one. And duality, as far as CHROs are concerned, there are two key aspects or two key roles that we have to play. And I was talking about this recently with somebody. I think the first role, and it's not in terms of order of priority, but I'm saying that the first role that we play is, as a CHRO, you are, kind of, you are the, I would say, um, the strategy brainstorm person. You are the thought leader. You are also the friend, philosopher, and guide, not just to the CEO, but to all the other CXOs around the table. So
Mm.
you're the one that people come to you when you're there, in that steering committee or whatever. They turn to you when they're making decisions. They talk to you, and there are a lot of times when they're evaluating decisions, and kind of what are the next steps. I think these are very open conversations that they have. So the first role that you play out there is somebody who listens well and is able to respond with the right level of inputs and insights, if nothing else, with the right questions. And to be able to do that, you have to be business aligned. You have to have deep understanding of the business that you operate in, and know, kind of, you have to know your business. You have to know your game before you actually start telling people. Otherwise, they will not ask you. And so, one credibility is a business centric CHRO who's able to contribute, influence, and drive the right conversations at the senior most level. Now, the second role that you also play is that you're a steward of talent. And what I mean, it just sounds very cliche, but so there are a lot of people who say, I'm a HR person, I love people and all. No, if you fundamentally look at it, your role is the only role in the CXO community where people mandate is a core part of your scorecard.
Mm.
So you're the actual people representative on the table.
Correct.
So, as a part of that duality, while you're contributing to business, while you're helping people take the right decisions, while you're being skeptical and you're questioning or adding value to problem solving, sessions which are happening, because you have the people hat, you're also asking them to take the right decisions from a people first perspective. You're
Mm.
also asking them whether, decision A or decision B, whichever is good for business, that's great. Now, what does it mean from a people point of view? Because whether it's a business head, whether it's a sales head, whether it's a finance head, they don't have a people mandate.
Mm.
You're actually bearing that,
Mm.
kind of portfolio. And therefore those are the two roles that you're actually playing. Now, if you veer completely towards business side and you're not a people person, then that becomes a problem. If you veer too much towards the other side, that also becomes a problem. You have to know how to balance. So
Mm.
let me give an example. On the business side, for the business to grow, or the business to scale and sometimes be profitable, you're actually taking decisions along with the CXOs and the CEO on org restructuring. You're taking decisions around downsizing. Sometimes you're taking decisions and creating policies around productivity, right? Work from home, shifting to back to office, etc. But at the end of the day, when you're doing all of this, how do you bring the people angle to the decisions that you're taking? So, you know, a simple example that I have tried to, actually drive through all the organizations I've worked in is, when I think about any restructuring, I actually want to ensure that the people who have been impacted in any way, or, there are role changes which are happening, land on their feet.
Mm.
They're well placed, they're well positioned. We take time to rehome them, right? So that's kind of number one. Number two is, when you're thinking about, something as simple as work from home to back to office, it's not a decision that you take independently. I think this is the place you not just talk to the leaders, but you talk to people and you tell them that, look, at the end of the day, here's what we're trying to solve. What do you think makes sense? And then you take inputs from people, and then you come up with the right solution, right? So I think that being people centric is extremely important to drive the right outcomes, and you cannot drive business outcomes if you don't have the people hat. So that's the duality that you have to maintain, and it's a difficult balance. It's a
Yeah.
difficult balance, and that's something I want to leave everybody with.
Awesome. So people mandate versus sort of making sure that one grows the business, runs the business, and then there are so many nuances to it. So very well summed up. Thank you for that. Let's now look at what CHROs can borrow from founders, right? So, in your view, what specific skills or instincts you think they should borrow from the founders?
I think, I mean, I have been, kind of while I've worked with a number of, big brands and multinationals, and as well as kind of tech services firms. But I have been blessed by the fact that when I joined these organizations, they were in amazing kind of like growth phases. So, which meant that most of the business leaders were playing very entrepreneurial role. And of course, my last company which I had joined was a startup. Now, what I've actually learned over time, I think the first trait that I would talk about is from a process perspective, fail fast and learn faster, right?
Mm,
And what that and how do I translate that, kind of to HR, is the fact that we love our ideas, we love the process, we do deep thinking around it, and we kind of think about people and how it's going to impact them, and we go back and forth, etc., and then we create white papers around it and all of that. So by the time we decide to implement, it takes a long time. And one of the things that I've actually learned, from most of the leaders that I've worked with, is if you have a great idea, think about how you're going to do it and just do it, right? And there is a zero point 0.5 version. If it sticks, go to 1.0, right?
mm, mm,
But you always need to have more than one thing in the burner, so that you try them out, and then you run with the idea which is the best. So
mm,
fail fast, learn faster. The learning comes from what has failed, get rid of it fairly quickly.
mm,
Second is what I call POP. Pop basically is the pace of pivot, right? And what that basically means is, if you look at almost 2019, 2020 onwards, what we have all witnessed is that every 6 months, in some cases every quarter, technology has pivoted, kind of our kind of the business has pivoted, economies have pivoted. And therefore what happens is that if you want to survive and continue to grow, you cannot create a 3 year or 4 year plan,
mm,
right? So what happens is that you take your 3 or 4 years, you have a vision of where you want to go to, and then you break it up into quarters, and you have to pivot every quarter. And if there is no change, then you continue with business as usual. So your ability or your pace of pivot basically means that the speed with which you're able to kind of almost change your strategy, stop one action plan, start off with another action plan, depending upon how the economy has changed around you,
mm,
right? So I think that's the second one: abandon ideas that are no longer relevant,
mm,
abandon business plans which are no longer relevant, and move very quickly to the next.
mm,
My third trait that I have really learned is, kind of, is what I call flat hierarchies and radical transparencies.
mm,
Now, what that basically means is that if you have to move fast and you have to grow and scale, what is really important is that you get the word out and you get it fast.
mm,
And you also need multiple inputs to
mm,
make the right decisions,
mm,
which means that first is radical transparencies is all about, kind of, whether it's metrics, whether it's outcomes, whether it's results. Every quarter we used to do, town halls, we used to do, open houses where we would actually share the hits and misses, and we would ask for questions, and we would ask people's perspectives on it. And the best ideas came from the youngest guy in the room,
mm,
right? So the
mm.
fact is that radical transparency basically means that you're not communicating, you're also collecting inputs from people around you,
Yep.
saying, and you're also listening to the questions they're asking, saying, why are we doing this, why not something else? And that also triggers your thought. And flat hierarchy means the speed at which you're actually communicating and you're handing things over to people.
Yep.
You don't have a pyramid. You now have multiple people who are capable and who can pick things up and run with it. The other traits that I would talk about is agility or execution intensity.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, there is no headquarter which is going to do things for you, right? At a CXO level, you are the design thinker and you have to be the executor, because at this point in time, having the seat on the table means you have a ringside view of what's changing and how quickly it's changing. That
Yep.
means you're the one who's putting the paper together on what we need to do and how quickly we need to take actions, and then you get it executed. So I think these are the ones that I would talk about in terms of learnings that I've got. And the final one, which I've always marveled at, is what I would talk about. So you may want to call it, you know, learning agility or whatever, but it's about reading the tea leaves. So you have if you have to continue to be relevant, and I say this for not just every CHRO, CXO. I constantly, this is a drum that I beat in my function. If you want to be relevant 5, 10, 15 years from now, you have to be agile, and you have to skill yourself irrespective of the level at which you are.
Hmm.
And which means that you're not just understanding business, you're understanding technology, you're getting into the deep end, and you're trying to stay ahead of the curve. So whatever it is which kind of makes the world go around for your customers, you have to be good at it.
Yep.
And I think that those are traits that I have picked and learned from, as far as businesses are concerned or founders are concerned.
Awesome. Uh, I must say that there were lots of wisdom out there, right? Fail fast, learn faster, and this is the first time I'm hearing out something like pace of pivot. That was an absolute gem, uh, and I do agree. Flat hierarchies, uh, radical transparency, these are extremely crucial. And the last piece that you talked about, getting one, upskilled, and making sure that one is agile, right? I think those are very, very relevant pointers. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's now talk about, so we've sort of understood, what it takes to sort of make sure that one is aligned with what the founder wants, or what one can learn from the founder. But in your opinion, where do you see CHRO struggling the most when trying to think like a business owner?
I think that there are a couple of things that, as a function, that we struggle. So number one is speed of decision making. So what is our strength also becomes our weakness, because we have the people agenda and we constantly vacillate about, oh, what will this mean?
Hmm.
Um, at the end of the day, um, we need to be very, very sure, the decisions that we're taking make the most sense for people. So if you own duality, then from the beginning itself, when you make decisions, ensure that you make people first approach a key part of your decision making, and then drive the policies. So the speed of decision making should not kind of be your kind of your roadblock. The second part of it is, because we're a compliance, we're also, we have legalities, we have statutory compliances, we are a process function. What happens is, for everything that we need to do, there is a process that needs to be followed. So one of the things that I have consistently told my teams is, processes are meant to give a framework to people, to help them in executing their work, right? So if the process for some reason becomes outdated and not relevant, then discard the process and frame a new one, and it's okay, right? The second part I would call is delegation. We have so many functions, we have so many sub functions. Everybody has their, kind of area of not just expertise but control, and therefore, you know, things have to happen in a certain way. I would basically say that, first, CHROs being hands off and delegating to people and getting them to do work, that is very passe. You have to get into the details and you have to work with your teams. But you also have to empower them and ensure that they are responsible for outcomes and not just for um, specific tasks. Execution intensity. This is what is going to be the differentiator between you and a younger you. That means somebody who is 5, 10, 15 years younger than you. And if you want to have a long term career, then expertise.
Yeah, please
I
continue.
think that the third point I was talking about was execution intensity, which is the struggle of the CHRO. Execution intensity it's almost a do or die. And the reason I say this is the world is pivoting to a younger generation, which is more tech savvy. They're very fast decision makers, they're very opinionated, etc. And therefore, number one, you have to get onto the bandwagon. And number two is, at the end of the day, if you have to survive, you have to think like them and you have to be ahead of the execution curve. So the more you think about or act like I will sit and somebody else will do, you're making yourself irrelevant in the scheme of things. Execution intensity is super critical. And finally, the what I called about what I talked about earlier, which is reading the tea leaves. Um, super critical, because when the economy, when technology, when life around you is pivoting in every 3 to 6 months, you have to be plugged in and you have to know how it's going to impact you, your organization, as well as the business. And that take better decisions, not just around people, around process, abandon the processes which are irrelevant, anything which is archaic and is not useful in taking your organization forward, any structures or even functions which are not relevant, which need to be transformed, take the decisions now. So I think those are things that I talk about as roadblocks, that we need to get rid of. And again, at the end of the day, it's a shift. It's just a mental shift, because we come from a process. We are a process function. We are a compliance function. We tell people, kind of to fill forms, for a living, if you will. And therefore, that's the mindset that we have to get out of. So yeah.
Okay. Fair, fair point. Thanks for that. Let's now talk about how can CHROs build HR teams that reflect both founder style agility and CXO level depth. I know it's very difficult to do that, but would love to take understand your take.
Yeah. So I think there are, I would say, small steps, kind of simple steps that I would recommend. Again, I don't think these are the only steps. There could be other better ones out there. But some things that I have tried. So one is that, obviously, as far as the organization is concerned and its vision and its growth is concerned, you have to be aligned to that, and which means that you also need to have a parallel vision for your function.
Hmm.
Having said that, while you have that broad framework or the vision or mission, I would say, very clearly defined, stop defining goals for the full year,
Hmm.
right? So agility comes when you actually start defining goals for the every quarter for your team.
Hmm.
And therefore you make them mission focused,
Hmm.
right? So what I would always do is, almost we moved from annual performance appraisal systems to OKRs,
Hmm.
and we basically define goals and we define target, clear sense of direction and purpose to the team, and speed. So that's number one in terms of intensity. I think the second one, which is as a part of the fail fast, is you have to not just celebrate the best applied innovation or the best ideas, best process, or things that have delivered value to the end customer, which internal customer, external customer. But you also have to acknowledge and reward processes that have failed. Otherwise, why would people innovate?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So the point is that to push people to think differently, and also, as a part of the space of pivot, no ideas are bad ideas. Try all the ideas, some good, some bad. So that's about, incorporating the best idea, but also recognizing others which came to the table. Third part of it is mandate every leader and manager that before they table an idea that they are coming up with, have they pressure tested it with other people within the team,
Hmm.
right? So they have to carry people with them. Fail fast has to be the mantra for the business. And finally, the pace of pivot is very, very relevant for HR, which means that if you have HR BPs or compensation leaders, they have to understand the business direction. They have to understand, kind of why are we taking the decisions that we're taking. So, simple example, when we used to have these quarterly town halls where where the CEO and the business heads would talk about, what's the result for the previous quarter, what is the direction for the new quarter. I would in turn have, maybe a couple of days later, I would get all the 100 people in HR together, just sit down and have an open house with them. I would pick up some of the critical slides and say, okay, why don't some of you get up and explain this to me? Tell me what you think about it.
Hmm.
So the fact is that I would get them to start talking about what it means for them, the role that they're playing.
Hmm.
So, you have to make it real, and I think that's where, I those are some of the things that I used to do to drive that intensity of execution and agility.
Wonderful. Awesome. Lots of wisdom again there. Now, we all have been hearing about founders and CEOs. Uh, they're brilliant at storytelling, right? So, from your vantage point, what role does storytelling play in helping CHROs influence like founders and lead like CXOs?
It's a pretty critical.
Hmm.
I mean, I would say that it's one of the most mission critical, skills that a CHRO needs to have.
Hmm.
And why do I say that? At the end of the day, kind of when I talk about values, and, kind of when I talk about, I actually do the values workshop as a part of orientation programs every quarter. And what I basically tell people is that all of us, all of us in our families operate in a particular way, right? So when you go and visit somebody's house, they come and ask you for a cup of, tea and water within the first 30 seconds of landing up there, right? Or when we have festivals, all of us dress in traditional clothes and stuff like that. So the point really is, it's not like every festival your parents come and tell you that this is the dress code and this is what you have to wear. You just automatically do it, and then you tell your children to do it. That's the art of storytelling,
Hmm.
right? And that's the fabric that connects one generation to the next. So the most critical part of storytelling, which invariably is the grandparents, from grandparents it goes to the parents to the kids, is the fact that if you have to connect and you have to bind your organization, you need to tell the story. It's the vision of the organization. Why do we live? What is our purpose for our clients? What do we want to do for them? And it's not just once, you tell the story again and again. So that's number one. Second part of it is, as you tell stories, like when we were, at least when I was growing up, I had Amar Chitrakatha and Jataka tales and all of that. They're also, kind of moral stories. You learn from them, and then you learn why certain value is good and certain value is bad. That also comes from storytelling,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the point is that, and this is not just now, right? From prehistoric times, people used to beat drums to communicate. Then people painted on walls to communicate.
Yeah.
So every generation has used a method of storytelling to pass the word to the next generation.
Very
And that's the criticality of storytelling. That's how we communicate as human beings. That's what keeps us together as a community. And if you want to build a community in your organization
yeah.
and you want people to operate and practice the culture and the values of the organization, you have to tell the story.
Yeah.
You have to tell it consistently in every forum, every meeting, and you have to tell examples. You have to tell use cases. You have to tell
Yeah.
what works, what doesn't work. So I think storytelling is not just an art form. It's how you're going to pass the baton forward.
Super, super true. And you'll rarely see people raising objections to stories, right? The only thing that they would say, what happened next, right? So
Yes,
I think as humans, we are also sort of programmed. That's how the mind is sort of uh, wired, right? That what's happening next, right? So you don't have to convince people, right? It's the story that sort of pulls people into what message you're trying to convey at the end of the day.
absolutely. And Pulkit, the point is that how you tell the story becomes super critical. So the
Yes.
point is you can actually make a video and you can make it tremendously boring by, you know, almost like giving a lecture.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when you walk into the office, you tell people, hey, I'm going to have an open house. Then you pull up a chair, there's an office space, there are 50 guys sitting around you, you have a cup of coffee, and then you ask questions. Okay, what is your day looking like? And then you kind of say that, okay, we had a town hall. Do you guys remember what were the top priorities? Okay, why was this important? Let me give an example. This is what has happened as far as the client is concerned. So the fact is that it's the art of storytelling happened around the fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it very, very, very interesting. People come and sit there and listen, and they swap stories and they talk about why something was inspiring or not, right? So I think that's the point. It's how you tell the story and the fact that you passionately believe that the story is important.
Mm, 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 mm.
So I think it's the connective tissue that most people don't understand and don't give weightage for. So the more managers sit in their offices, the art of storytelling is going to die, and the team is not going to be connected.
Very true. Very true. And earlier, I think they used to call it folklore, right? And I read somewhere there are,
Yes.
I think, there are five types of folklores. I don't remember. Uh, I just remember a couple of them, maybe legends, myths, fables, and maybe two or three more. But
Yes. Yes.
a fantastic perspective there. Okay, awesome. So, next question: how do you personally toggle between the builder and the steward mindsets in your role? Would love to know that.
See, it's tough. You have to switch on, switch off. You have to ensure that you're putting the right filter. So the point is that sometimes you're operating from a very people perspective. You're very in a decision. You're very passionate about it. Okay. Um, then you have to pause and understand what is the business context. Why is this being pushed? And also the other way around, when something from a business perspective is important, you have to ask the questions, and you have to also be fearless about giving pushback where necessary. Not easy, but before you do any of that, and in kind of doing this toggle, surround yourself with people who you can walk up to and ask questions. And they needn't be senior, they could also be junior. Okay. And I've always been particular about the fact that when I couldn't understand something, I would walk up to the CFO and say, what does this mean? How do you calculate this? Show it to me. And he would like draw it out on a piece of paper and say, okay, this means this, and this is why it's become. And then it's like, oh, now I get it. Okay. And then I ask him, what do you think we should be doing? So ask people for points of view, and there's no shame in that. Nobody has the right answers.
Hmm.
Similarly, when we're thinking about something and you want people's perspective, walk up to your direct reports and just step out of your office, go and talk to them and say, hey, what do you guys feel? Is this going to fly, not fly? Tell me why it's not going to work. And the guys who are closest to the trenches will share so many insights. Go to the interns and tell them that you think you're going to like it. You will invariably have a completely different reaction to it. So I'm saying that the toggling, you only thing you have to do is be mindful about it. As long as you're mindful about the fact that I need to take more perspectives before I make a decision, but don't take like forever. Just walk out of your office and talk to people. By end of the day you should be able to decide. So I think that's what I do to toggle.
Hmm.
But it's about being mindful.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, awesome. Uh, is it possible for CHROs to groom future founders and CXOs at the same time? That's the first part of the question. Second is, how do they do it, or how should
Okay.
they do it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know about whether you can groom a future founder, because at the end of the day, to become a founder, it's about personal aspiration also, whether you want to take a risk and whatever it is. But you can definitely groom future CXOs and potentially CEO, you know. Um, and and yes, kind of you I would say a yes and no. So I think the no comes from the fact that succession plans invariably fail. Okay. And I believe these, and there'll be a lot of people who'll stand up when I make that statement, say, what are you saying? Right. But the reason I say that is from two perspectives. First is that any succession planning or grooming that you're doing, there's always two incumbents in that kind of in that room. There's one who's an existing guy, and there's a one who's a future,
Hmm.
right? Potential future. So from a firm perspective, when you're doing any grooming, um, the, you always have to remember, from an organization perspective, you have to build careers or next steps for both. You can't just build it for one.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the second one is going to become the blocker,
Hmm.
right? The existing incumbent will ensure that it fails.
Hmm.
If you don't carry him or you do it behind his back and something like this happens, it also makes the water really muddy for the entire department, saying, "Arey, usko, you've replaced him, but the organization did it by stealth," and there was, so it's just bad karma, if you will.
Yeah.
uh, and second part of it, from an organization point of view, again, never have only one option. You should always have more than one.
Hmm.
So that being said, the third mistakes that organizations do is that it was always reactive. Oh, this person is going to retire. Oh, this person has decided to move on. Or let me find out who is the successor for this role. So it is about getting in somebody to manage the job versus getting somebody who's going to, come in and grow the function, change the portfolio, whatever it is. That requires development.
Hmm. Hmm.
That requires investment and thoughtfulness. So I'm saying that there are things, as far as grooming and succession is concerned, that the organization needs to change in the way they handle the outgoing and how they think about the incoming. They should have more people. It should be a lot more thoughtful conversation, and it should help both people.
Hmm.
That having been said, um, you know I also think about, even as far as the individuals and others are concerned, how do you do it with grace? How do you do it with the right level of uh, depth, and thoughtfulness? And the final thing, which is really important, is any grooming and succession planning is never cast in stone.
Hmm.
What that basically means is all the incumbents who could potentially step up to a higher role need to be aligned to the pace of pivot,
Hmm. Hmm.
which means that they need to know that every time there's a pivot which is happening, they have to be ready and have the skills in that circumstance. Because if they're not, there's no entitlement. If the organization has radically pivoted, then they may not be in the running anymore.
Hmm.
So I'm actually saying that, when you start thinking about grooming people, It has to be thoughtful decision. It has to be with a development mindset. You have to look at people in the C-suite and level one, level below, and actively think about the roles that they can actually take, and then invest in it.
mm,
And final is, it's not about pedigree; it's about the potential.
mm, mm.
There is somebody who may not have the pedigree but is very hungry to do the job, and on the other hand, there would be somebody who, you know, has the pedigree, has everything going for him, and they could you can have, you know, the other person as well. So there's a fantastic I think there's a fantastic article, in HBR. I think it was written about 15 years back, called, uh, kind of the competent jerk versus the lovable fool,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And you have to kind of figure out, how do you find the, somebody who is competent and lovable, and that's the hypo. But the rest, you also have to put them in positions where they're most um, meaningful. So I'm actually saying that there are some, kind of table stakes when we groom CXOs, which is about investment, which is about pace of pivot, which is about transparency to all incumbents, saying you have a shot at the job, but you have to keep yourself relevant. You cannot do succession planning or grooming when you have a current incumbent in the role and you don't have a plan for him. If you don't have a plan for him and her, or her, then if the person is retiring, it's different. If not, then it just muddies the waters.
Mm,
You cannot do this without kind of creating some ripples, unless the person is underperforming severely, in which case it's a very quick decision.
mm,
So I'm saying there is this other aspect about potential
mm,
versus pedigree,
mm.
and who has followership, who doesn't have followership. So it's all of those parameters have to be taken into consideration when you think about grooming CXOs.
Awesome. Uh, I'm sort of totally blown away by the methodology and the kind of subtle nuances and details that you went into, because this is an extremely important question, right? Especially not just at a CHRO level, but at an org level also. So the way you sort of put that together, that was awesome. Thank you for that. Let's now switch to our rapid fire section, right? We typically ask questions with answers which don't extend beyond one or two statements. But if you would want to get into a question and double down on more nuances, that's also fine. So I'll start
Sure.
off with the first rapid fire question. One trait HRs need more of to be boardroom ready.
I think they need to not just speak up, they need to have a point of view.
Okay. Okay.
So the what I'm clarifying here is, a lot of times people speak,
Yeah.
and then you have everybody thinking, what is this guy saying?
Hmm.
So have a point of view which is relevant. On the other hand, being silent as a grave is not intelligent.
Yeah.
Then why would anybody have you there if you're not going to contribute?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So from seat to voice to having a point of view, I think that's how the journey has been, from what
Yes.
I've seen, right? Okay. Next question. One CXO trait founders often underestimate.
Followership. And the reason I say followership is, you have reached the CXO position unless it's somebody who has been brought in and appointed there. But in most cases, if you've grown through the ranks, it's because people believe in you and will follow you, and it has its own power. So leverage that followership to drive outcomes.
Okay. What's harder, launching from zero or scaling with governance?
Scaling with governance.
Interesting. One book that shaped your HR leadership style.
I don't have a book, but I have an article. I
Okay.
think it was written in 1950s. It's an HBR case study called Pygmalion in management.
Okay.
And basically the core philosophy of that article is people rise to the expectations that you have in them.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
called Pygmalion effect, for all I know.
Yes, it is a Pygmalion effect. The article was titled Pygmalion in Management. It was written by Livingston. And I believe in that mantra. So you can take ordinary people and you can do extraordinary work if you put faith in them. They will deliver. They will deliver.
Okay.
Um, I mean, obviously, there are going to be some limitations. You see what you can do, but every person will do 25 to 30% more than what he can do if you believe in them.
Very well said. And I've seen also, I mean, across various functions. That's very true. Finish the sentence. A CHRO who can't fill in the blank will struggle in the next 5 years.
um, who can't master pace of pivot,
Okay. Okay.
especially related to emerging technologies, etc. Basically, as a trait, can't master pace of pivot
Uh,
will not be relevant in the next few years.
Understood. Build fast or build right? Which wins in your world?
Build fast.
Okay. Brings us to the last question of this amazing conversation.
But I have to clarify, Pulkit.
Yeah, please.
I come from a quality background in Xerox, which means that leadership through quality and later on in Whirlpool, Six Sigma, etc. That's been my foundation.
Hmm.
So moving from there, where you look at Ishikawa diagram, 7QC tools to build fast has been a journey.
Hmm.
But I've realized that that would not make me survive.
Hmm.
This is what is going to make me survive.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Last question. I wish we could have continued with this conversation because there's no dearth of questions, that I have at my end. But we'll have to sort of close it here. What would your founder manifesto for CHRO say in one bold line?
Oh, Carpe diem. So
Uh,
carpe diem basically means seize the day,
yeah.
make every day count,
Yeah.
and kind of blow it out of the water. So that's basically what my manifesto would be, uh, for myself, for my team, for everybody who comes to work. You know, every day counts.
Awesome. That's a wonderful philosophy, I must say. And I think each one of us should try and adopt the same mindset. But thanks again. Thank you so very much for sharing your insights today. I must say that I learned a lot, quite a few concepts that I've never heard of, right? And so many other things that I'm sure a lot of listeners out there are going to gain from. Uh, Quick one before we wrap up. Where slash how can our listeners contact you should they need any help? Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to come back to you over LinkedIn. I think that's the best channel, but still, if you would want to call that out, that would help.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. I do respond very quickly to messages on LinkedIn, and the other great place is to connect with me on my email. I'm very fast on any of those platforms, LinkedIn, and through my email, and hopefully, you will be able to share my email with whoever wants to reach out, and I'm accessible.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much again, Shailaja, for spending time with us, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience, your learnings, your failures, and whatnot. Right? I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that was the case with you as well.
Absolutely. I think, I enjoyed this 1 hour. So it took me back when I was writing my notes and thinking about what I would talk about today. I'm very, very happy to share my experiences and whatever I've learned, as long as it makes sense to people and, it helps them in their leadership journeys. It was a great, great conversation, and I love the questions, Pulkit. Very, very thought provoking. Some of them got me to pause and actually do some thinking, saying, okay, what will I say here? So I love the discussion, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you, Shailaja. Thank you. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in to this episode of the CHRO Mindset Podcast. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and please do leave us a review, because each of those reviews that you leave, right, helps us reach to a wider audience, right, and helps us share all the wisdom that all the great CHROs who have been joining us on these episodes can share with a wider set of audience. Until the next episode, I would say goodbye to you, but see you in the next episode with another HR stalwart from whom you can learn again. Thanks again.